Another question then, please. Yeah, the woman in the second row here.
Hi, mine's a question for Helen. It's sort of about methodology, really. You said at one point certain types of behaviour are likely to have an impact on whether someone's raped, and I just wonder how you can possibly test that. How can you create two parallel situations where perhaps in one situation a woman drinks and is raped and doesn't drink and then isn't raped? And when you talk about whether that sort of like the impact of blame or responsibility, surely if you're saying that certain types of behaviour are more likely to lead to rape, you're actually endorsing blaming rape victims, because and if they know that those types of behaviour are more likely to lead to rape, if they still engage in them, then they're to blame. It's not responsibility. It's not as if it could have gone both ways. They're more likely to have been raped, therefore they're to blame.
Do you want me to answer that straight away?
Sure, yes.
I said a lot of things that were very contentious in my presentation, but I don't think Jennifer will correct me if I'm wrong here. I don't really think it's contentious that certain forms of behaviour have been shown to increase the risk of rape. And what's quite interesting is that, and Jennifer will definitely correct me if I'm being misleading here, but that's really accepted, I think, by rape researchers, by rape myth researchers and rape researchers. The difference is that they're not happy with the language of increased risk because, as you say, they're worried that that sort of forms the link with the idea of responsibility and then on to blame. But they say the same thing, but the word that they prefer to use there is vulnerability. So they do accept that drinking, going home with someone, when you're drunk, do increase a woman's vulnerability to being raped. But that seems to me to be really playing with words, because if you talk about increasing vulnerability, that is a sort of politer way of saying that the risk is increased. And I absolutely refute a connection between increased risk and blame. It's completely possible to think that certain behaviour increases the risk of any crime, whether that's being beaten up, being raped, or whatever, without attributing any blame to that. Of course women have every right to get drunk, to go out partying and so on. And of course, and this is something I absolutely agree with Jennifer on, of course the blame lies squarely on the person who commits the crime. I don't see any contradiction between recognising what increases the risk and refuting the idea of blame there. And I think many members of the public would agree with that.
Can I just say something there? There's a Home Office study which points out that one of the biggest risk factors now for women who are assaulted is going to a nightclub once a week. So in terms of what you do and the situations you are in can increase your vulnerability to certain types of crime. Now, it seems to me we need to make a distinction here between legal responsibility and moral responsibility. The law does not attribute any responsibility now to the victim of rape, whereas traditionally we know judges would say when it came to sentence, well, she was contributory negligent or something like that. But it seems to me that in terms of personal morality, bearing in mind that we are a very diverse society, I think it is wholly unrealistic to assume that there is only one moral approach to this. And equally, it seems to me simply factually, we all know that if you are drunk, you are far more likely to have accidents. So if you fall off a bar stool, hit your head and have a serious brain injury because you are drunk, people are going to say, well, you chose to get drunk. So it does seem to me there is something a little sanitised about the idea that we cannot even have a discussion about the moral responsibility, whatever people may want to say about the legal responsibility.
Okay. So there's a woman on the second to last row, pretty much at the back.
Firstly, I'd just like to thank Nazir for making the point that rape is fundamentally about power and control. And I would just also like to raise the question of vulnerability and increased risk factors. I mean, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but rape can happen to anyone, to somebody that drinks, doesn't drink, is married, is not married, is a child, is not a child. The only increased risk factor, in my eyes, is being a woman.
Except that men also get raped.
No, but that's a very good point, because you're absolutely right that when it comes to the statistics, women as victims far outnumber men as victims of sexual assault.
And so do young sexually active women outnumber older women. Those are the facts. And it seems very coy not to be able to have a straightforward discussion where we recognise who is more at risk of being raped. I don't see any connection between that and blaming victims for being raped.
Forgive me, can I just add? I mean, your point, 99.99% of rape victims are women. 99% of men that are raped are also raped by men. So from our perspective, there's the issue. It's about men and their desires or their needs and being fulfilled in some way. But I think your point is, a point made many, many times already, it's not the drink that does the rape, it's the rapist. And why should a woman have to not go to the nightclub once a week? Why should she dress up and put a chastity belt on or something? You know, the point is, men need to take responsibility.
Okay.